I'm Tim Ventura, and we're joined today by Darcy Weir, producer of the new documentary Transmedium Fastmovers USOs. Darcy has produced multiple documentary films and worked with QC, film finishing studios, audio finishing studios, video editors, animators, voice actors, writers, graphic artists, poster designers, caption and subtitling companies, film distributors, pitch deck producers, and much more during the film production process. So his feature-length documentaries are available through video on demand on Amazon Prime, iTunes, Tubi TV, Google Play, YouTube Red, and more. And many of his films can be found on cable and satellite networks. That is something that we're going to get into a little bit later. But first, Darcy, I want to welcome you. It is an absolute pleasure to have you with me today, sir.
Thank you very much, Tim. I'm happy to be here too. We're both looking kind of dapper, eh?
Yeah. Well, so today we're talking about Transmedium UAP and unidentified submerged objects, or USO. And you are the perfect person to speak on this because you just completed a new documentary, right? I mentioned that in the introduction. It's entitled Transmedium Fastmovers USOs. So I want to start out by asking, what inspired you to do a documentary on the transmedium aspect of the UAP phenomena? And I want to dig in a little bit more about where people can watch this film for themselves.
Sure. So what inspired me, I always was looking at UAP or UFO phenomenon for the past decade. I started making documentaries in this genre, which is, I guess, the study of UAPs or UFOs back in 2012. I released my very first documentary. It went to YouTube. It was feature length, and it got like 4 million hits. And then subsequently, I realized, hey, I might be able to do this somewhat professionally. And I took it down, I redid it, and eventually, at this point, I've got like over 15 feature-length documentaries published online on streaming platforms like Amazon and Apple TV and stuff like that. And I was always curious about what's going on in our oceans because, our oceans are a bit of a unknown. And I've been scuba diving since I was 15 years old. My dad's a master diver. He's a PADI certified guy, and he kind of got me into it in my teens. And I've always been interested in the oceans. So I embarked on this journey of finding out what's going on in terms of UFOs or UAPs regarding our oceans, starting pretty much in 2022. I was writing and figuring out what was going on, and I started shooting in February of 2023. And quickly, I started going down that rabbit hole, so to speak, and speaking with some subject matter experts regarding this phenomenon. And, the big get for this documentary for me was former Rear Admiral Tim Gallaudet, worked for the Navy for 32 years. 7 years of those, he was the chief oceanographer for the Navy. He's also been a director at NOAA. And he has his PhD from Scripps University in oceanography. He's a very well-educated man. You would call him a scientist. And he's very serious about the UAP phenomenon. He understands that there is something going on here that is anomalous, that can't be explained away by prosaic means. And that aligned with the story I wanted to tell because I'd already been looking into this anomalous phenomenon for a long time, as I told you. And I'd say he inspired me to really go to the depths of the unknown when it comes to this phenomenon and our oceans.
Well, and I appreciate you mentioning that. I'm going to come back to that in a moment. Tim Gallaudet is a tremendous figure in the UAP world. And again, as you mentioned, his training, his experience, his education is absolutely top notch. So I want to dig in a little bit into the documentary process. I have considered doing a documentary of my own in the future. I am absolutely positive that there are a lot of folks out there in the UFO UAP community that have similar urges regarding their own experiences and their own interests. And as you mentioned, this is a journey, right? Not just for the audience who watches it, but for the filmmaker who undertakes creating it. So, walk me through the process here a bit. At some point, you sat down and said, I'm going to make a documentary about USOs. Then what?
Well, when I make a documentary, there's two ways that I do it. I do actually script what I want to have in the different acts of the film. So, and I didn't always do that. I've learned throughout my career that that might be a better opportunity from the beginning so that I can keep track of what I've done and build towards the goal of presenting the full story, right?
Yeah.
And I actually got somewhat trained on how to do that in the past few years. Like during COVID, I got trained by my friend Jeffrey D. Calhoun, who's a
Mm.
screenwriter. You can look him up on LinkedIn and stuff like that. He's a pretty brilliant guy, and he shows people how to screenwrite a feature film, like a fiction, but also he shows what the good standards are for building a documentary. And there's like an Excel sheet, which is like a Google sheet, and you can put in one column like your what's on screen to illustrate what's being talked about by the narrator, and then you can have another column for that narration that you've written, and you have another column for I guess like reenactments, that type of thing, and another column for music and sound effects and stuff like that, right? So you can sort of build a story pretty well if you have some of that stuff up front they're like kind of the gets that you want to
Yeah.
achieve, right? And you have like first act, second act, third act, conclusion type thing. Um, so I mean, that's essentially how I try to get like a documentary done quickly, and especially in the UFO field, like where all this stuff is happening with Congress and new news coming out weekly. Really, it's incredible. It's kind of staggering, especially since I've connected with the Twitter community. I've made some friends, and I think I've really connected to a network of people that understand the workings of things with the law and the history of this subject better than I ever have before, right? Before I kind of teamed up with, I guess you would say, UFO influencers, people that have been talking about the subject or the study of UFOs for many years, and it's really interesting to sort of see that information is so dynamic that people who are just pretty much new to the subject can become very well educated quickly with social media these days. Um,
Yeah. And I completely agree with you on that. I think Twitter is absolutely where the latest and greatest information is. And I think one of the things that you alluded to is it is coming from such a wide variety of sources now. You have, I mean, this growing collection of rumors about whistleblowers and things like that that seems to just kind of, it's from everywhere and nowhere all at once. You have the congressional work, right? And that is coming out of people who are, they're all on Twitter. You also have, your normal speakers on this subject. And I want to get into them a little bit because you did have some amazing key speakers in this film. So, again, retired Rear Admiral and former Navy Chief Oceanographer Tim Gallaudet was involved, um, along with Navy submarine researcher Jim Goodall, UFO historian Richard Dolan. Those seem like the three key figures that I saw when I was looking at this. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's very accurate. I also featured Mark D'Antonio, who's an astronomer, and he actually works for MUFON, which has been a repository and research group regarding UFOs for decades now. They've even sent out personnel to investigate
Mm.
reported sightings that have had slag material and trace evidence left over afterwards. And some of that stuff that's been reported to MUFON, they've turned around and even given to government agencies or military and so on, which is a whole other thing. But um, Mark D'Antonio, he actually witnessed a USO or a fast mover when he was
Ah,
on his very first submarine trip as a um, contractor for the military, basically for the Navy, and
okay.
let's say a scientist, right? And his story was included in there, and this guy is pretty cool because he's a skeptic most of the time when it comes to like UFO videos. He's been on like the History Channel's Proof Is Out There show where they try to debunk before they prove something, which I appreciate. Um, and I also had Chris Stiles, who has written about one of the most prominent ocean-based, let's say, UFO crash sites in history. Um, it's called the Shag Harbor incident, and it's like
Ah,
Canada's
okay.
Roswell is what they kind of allude it to being close to in terms of UFO history. Chris Stiles is based out of Nova Scotia, one of the most eastern provinces of Canada. That's right there on the Atlantic, the North Atlantic. And he talks about the Shag Harbor incident that happened in 1967 with possible non-human intelligence in the water, like believe it or not, and a NATO mission to try and see what was down there. And he talks about a new uh, mission that he found out about that happened 7 years prior in 1960 called the Shelburne incident. So that was all mind blowing. He talks about DEFCON levels that were discussed to have been possibly alerted by these NATO Navy men when this mission happened, that type of stuff. So look, there's quite a few people that speak in this documentary, and then there's
Yeah.
Louis Borges who speaks about this. He's a fellow Canadian, and I also had the leaker of the now kind of infamous UAP videos that came from the Department of Homeland Security in 2021, I think, or 2022.
Mm, okay.
And that guy's name is Andy Marciel. He's kind of like just one of these people that started a social media presence like Jeremy Corbell that was regarding UAPs. He calls himself NYUAP discussion on Instagram. He's got like 30,000 followers. One of those people was a Department of Homeland Security agent that liked what he was doing and said, "Hey, I've got these anomalous videos. I'd like you to release them to the public." And just like we were talking about earlier, full circle, that sort of like um community that we have now with like Twitter, Instagram, all these different social media platforms where people are super connected like never before. uh that is what happened in this case. And we have Andy Marciel being connected to a Department of Homeland Security agent that got him to leak three videos that initially there was a lot of debate about, controversy, McWest, and all these people saying they're not real. But then lo and behold, DHS releases their UAP documents and their videos, their reports of those videos at the end of 2023 saying those were real.
Now, in terms of timing, a statement by Tim Gallaudet just hit Twitter where he claims to personally know the folks that oversaw the crash retrieval programs and the programs that analyzed the UAP data. This is a big reveal for the UAP phenomena, and when it comes to Transmedium UAP and USOs, there seems to be a bit of a blind spot in terms of public knowledge. So what do you think of Tim's statement on crash retrieval in general? And without giving away any spoilers, can we expect any big reveals of info, potentially from him, potentially from others in the new film?
In this film, we really focused on what's going on in the oceans in terms of historical accounts of UFOs, USOs, and I really wanted to focus on the stuff that we could point out with facts, to really nail down, are there anomalous UAPs or UFO sightings happening in and around our oceans, right? But his testimony that was quite interesting was that he was pretty sure he tracked down where some of that listening data, some of that tracking data, radar and, the SOSUS microphone system at the seabed, that type of thing, could be stored.
Okay.
So he mentions that, and he said that it was a third party that is feeding that information to their clients, the DoD, guys like 3-letter agencies and stuff like that, right? And so that was something that was interesting. And since then, he has come public. He was on the Big Thing podcast, which is the interview that we did recently with Christian Karloff. And he said that he's basically working with people that were part of the legacy crash retrieval programs, part of the special access programs that are trying to reverse engineer these things and, that are currently have this technology in their possession. So that was pretty mind-blowing when I heard that. That was news to me, and he hasn't been doing a lot of interviews. I've been doing the lion's share of them regarding this documentary, and he's currently in the process of getting his security clearance reinstated. I really hope that goes through because that could be key to actually getting direct information from some of these agencies that have been collecting this data, because it's classified. And that's the conundrum. That's the, catch-22 when it comes to this subject. People say, why can't you just release all the data? Show us that aliens are here or whatever they are, right? Now we're talking non-human intelligence, whatever that may be. Show us the data. Show us that it's the proof, right? And I think the classified world has that proof. And it's not allowed to be public. It's for need to know purposes or for people that have the disclosure, have the security clearance. They have the need to know, not the whole public, not the taxpayers, which is a problem, right? I see that a lot of congressional members are now just getting read into this. You see these news sort of sound bites where congressional members have been walking out of these skiffs, these special access, these security briefing rooms that are, highly classified data can be disclosed. And, one of the more recent ones, the congressional members were walking out just in complete disbelief with the look on their face. And they were telling the press what they could, but saying, it's classified and I really can't speak to this that much.
Well, and if I could jump in, this is off my questions list, but yeah, I mean, again, there are so many things that are up in the air right now. There are so many things that have been started that have yet to be resolved, right? And I think there was already a growing collection of them before the David Grush testimony. But, when he came forward, I think that spun the narrative, you know, completely, and it reconnected this modern narrative about the Nimitz sightings and Tic Tacs and things like that to 75 years of unresolved mysteries, right? And one of the things that I've been seeing lately is like I just saw an article about potential debris collected from a 1952 UFO event. So this goes back a long ways. And in terms of the general public, uh, answers have not been provided. I'm not sure if anybody has those answers, right? But yeah, but I think that people are demanding more information. They want to know what's going on, and I think that they have a right to. So yeah, those congressional skiffs where they walk out and I've heard about those as well, and it troubles me because the next question is, what is it that they're being shown that is so troublesome to them? You know?
Hmm. Yeah, and I mean, like, look, Neil deGrasse Tyson recently said that, openly that um, the government classified tectonic plate movement information from the public that he knew of, right? When he was looking into this, trying to get access to this data. And, if they won't even publish information about our tectonic plate movement, what else would they classify, right? What else would they deem to be sensitive to the public? They get to play in that um, world, but not the general public. And I think that's where UAPs and UFOs and USOs, which is the same thing, right? When I talk about Transmedium, that title for the documentary, it's just describing a UAP or UFO, as it used to be called, going from one medium, which is the gaseous atmosphere that surrounds our planet, to the oceans, which is a liquid, environment, and from what is being described in some Navy communications that we got released through the debrief when they did a Freedom of Information Act request regarding USOs and supposed transmedium objects. It seems that the Navy has been tracking these objects going from the air, from the atmosphere to the oceans, unimpeded in speed, continuing these speeds without friction or damage. It just seems like these objects don't operate by the traditional scientific physics and gravity and all that stuff that we would expect our aircraft and traditional flying objects to demonstrate.
I love the fact that you focused on water because that has been a neglected aspect of this phenomena. Again, going back 75 something years. I think when you look at popular culture, right, in movies, TV, books, a lot of the big reports, there are some, you mentioned Shag Harbor, there are others that are very water based, right? But for the most part, when you think UFOs, you're thinking Area 51, desert, I mean, aliens in the sky. Water does not really play a large part in that. And yet, in terms of documented military evidence, the majority of recent events are connected to water in the oceans. I mean, we've got this overlapping visual sensor and radar footage from the Nimitz carrier group near Catalina Island, reports of training incursions by Ryan Graves in the W-72 training area off Virginia Beach, the Atlantic, radar data for UAP swarming the USS Omaha off the San Diego coast, and customs footage of transmedium craft over Aguadilla in Puerto Rico. I think that was 2013. And
Yeah.
you mentioned more Puerto Rico videos in 2021, right? So these are all over water. These all involve the oceans. And yet it's something that is so overlooked, I guess, in the UFO community, or it has been overlooked until recently. And I think that's the key. We are starting to focus in on it, right?
Yeah. I mean, people don't really think about the ocean. They think about the beaches, right? That's usually what we embrace as a society. But the oceans account for 70% of the surface or the area of the planet. And, speaking with Tim Gallaudet, he's saying we only know about 5% of the ocean volume, you know, that's like all the different levels going down to the Hadal zone, which is where the abyss or the bottom of our trenches are. We only know mapped the seabed floor around the world up to 25%, and less than 25% has been mapped with modern technological means.
Hmm.
So the oceans are very largely unknown still. We don't know 100% what's down there. And there seems to be a lot of UAP or USO activity that most likely we're only just scratching the tip of the iceberg here when we talk about the events that you just mentioned. So in the documentary, I went back and I looked at, cases that came from even the 1800s, where if you think about it, our initial navies of the world, they were like the astronauts. They boldly went where no man had gone before, traveling around the planet, trying to map out new areas or conquer new places to call home. And the oceans were a scary place to be. And sometimes
Yeah.
they would have naturalists on board, which were like the ultimate scientists of the time to categorize, make very astute observations of the environment and the landscape and what was going on their sailing trips. And so we include a story from this British naturalist who was sailing from England all the way to Hawaii. And it was 1825, and he recorded an incident that happened in the dead of night, pitch dark. A large sphere like object came out of the ocean. It illuminated the whole deck as if it was daytime, and plunged back into the ocean, came back out, and flew around their, old wooden vessel, to the shock and amazement of these Navy, or of these, old Navy men. They thought, what is this? And the naturalist didn't equate it with like spirits or God or something like that you would expect. He kind of took a scientific approach and just said this was a strange object. And that's what we're talking about with UFOs, USOs, and so on, that are emanating from our oceans. So it's not
Well,
just.
when you so that event that you just described, right? I mean, hundreds of years ago, it reminds me a lot of a video that I saw just a couple of years ago, right? Where you had a spherical thing going into the ocean. And so it's a continuing phenomenon.
Yeah,
And to me, this speaks to it probably not being foreign adversaries like many have suggested it
exactly.
could be, because those foreign adversaries weren't there in the 1800s, right? I mean, nobody had these capabilities then. And to
Yeah.
be honest, from what I understand from this performance and, all that, nobody has those capabilities now, really. So,
Well, that's what Tim Gallaudet's point is, right? Like he's worked in the Navy and knows what we can fly off of our state of the art aircraft carriers in the middle of the ocean. And it certainly is nothing like a sphere that has no traditional flight surfaces,
yeah.
that, are being reported flying in these highly sensitive, secure areas of the ocean. And they are coming out of the ocean and going into the ocean. So, what are these things? How are people propelling, or how is somebody propelling something that's spherical through the atmosphere, let alone the ocean? Um, it's a real head scratcher, right? And I can't say it's not like some kind of artificial intelligence. I can't say it's not um, extraterrestrial or non-human intelligence. I just don't know what it is, and I think our pilots want to know, and I think now congressional members want to know, and the public, uh, who are slowly learning about this more and more as well.
Well, let me ask about the submarine encounters. That has been a really interesting area for me because I think, in terms of these ocean events, over the last couple of years, our awareness has increased, right? We have this growing collection of videos. We have, witness testimony. We have a lot of information that is coming out. So we're starting to at least get a handle on what's going on there. The submarine aspect of this is still a big question mark. And there are lots of rumors circulating around about submarine officers discussing phenomena like strange underwater sounds, swift moving objects detected by sonar, instances of submarines being outmaneuvered by USOs. But from what I understand, the documentation is not out there for this, and I think there are several reasons for that. So, what did you come across in terms of that area?
Yeah, so in speaking with Jim Goodall, who has written a book on all of the ocean-based submarine technology around the world that we know of, um, he knows of Bob McGuire, who rode on, I think it was the SN 767, a nuclear powered Navy submarine, and they were out at ocean, and a fast mover or a USO was detected by their sonar operator when he was doing his very first um, dive in a submarine as a guest on board. Same thing with Mark D'Antonio. Very first ride, he said he saw the sonar operator scream out, con sonar, fast mover, fast mover. And this was moving at, in excess of several hundred knots. The fastest known technology that we have that can move in, at least the excess of 100 knots is a torpedo that has the capability of creating supercavitation, which is like, at the tip of the torpedo, they've created this envelope, which is a jet stream of steam or air that
Hmm.
shoots out the nozzle. And when it creates that envelope, it allows the torpedo to sail through the ocean with less friction, the water. And that can go maybe around 170 knots, but certainly not 300 or more. So, what are
Yeah.
these objects? And Mark D'Antonio tried to look into that. He spoke to many other Navy submariners throughout his research of this phenomenon after he witnessed something his very first time going out. And he said Navy submariners are pretty well aware of this phenomenon and it's being cataloged. In fact, when he witnessed it, the XO told the sonar operator to log it and dog it, meaning just put it in, you know, your data collection, whatever they have there. So that means they are collecting this information. And again, going back to Tim Gallaudet, he's saying that there is some form of repository for this somewhere within the United States, where they're keeping track of these Navy or submarine or what have you encounters with USOs. And so
Yeah.
that would be called, I guess, the rumor has it, a fast mover program.
Interesting. Interesting. So, again, slowly all of this stuff is starting to come to light. And then
Yeah.
there's also that nuclear correlation, right? Which I feel like I'm proselytizing about that, but I'm not the only one. Robert L. Hastings had UFOs and nukes, which is almost like the Bible for that aspect of the phenomena.
Yep.
And one of the things that is notable is a lot of these Navy platforms are nuclear in nature, right?
Yep.
So is that
Not
something that
only,
came up at all?
yeah, well, not only are the submarines that would have been operated that noticed these fast movers, are they operating on a nuclear powered reactor for their energy source, but they also have like nuclear warheads that have 14 uh, nuclear bombs inside of each. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
cluster nuclear bombs, like incredible armaments. So it is something that just keeps coming up. You see this activity throughout history over nuclear power plants that's been reported. So that aspect is there with the submarines, and then you also, like you said, Robert Hastings talking to Robert Salas. He's
Yeah.
he always discusses his incident where the Minutemen at a nuclear missile installation witnessed a UFO hovering just over top of the ground there, and at the same time, three of their nuclear missiles went down. It was the refrigeration units, I think, were shut down, which made them inoperable. So that's pretty interesting stuff, especially if that was truly recorded and that information is being kept classified, but was, you know, reported and data was collected. And how many other times has that happened in our history? But in the documentary, we do try and allude to when we were doing our nuclear bomb testing, that UFOs were showing up as well.
Now, one thing I wanted to ask about is whether you touched on the Point Dume ocean anomaly at all. This is the one that is off the coast of Malibu. It's this anomalous Google Earth subsurface mapping, and people have looked at this and said maybe this is some kind of UAP base. Is that something that's in the documentary? And have you done any research on that? What do you know about that anomaly?
Yeah, so at the very end of the documentary, we start to try to like go towards, well, are there structures that these objects may be coming from under the ocean surface? Um, and we don't really spend a ton of time on it. I want to go into that maybe further in a future film in this series, Transmedium. But we look at that structure, right, that you just mentioned, and Tim Gallaudet actually was curious about that because he saw it as somewhat anomalous on Google Maps. He sent request and some further information he could dig up from NOAA, from scientists that understand what do you call it, like geology and ocean based, natural formations, that type of thing within NOAA. And they apparently got back to him and said, this does not look like a natural formation. Having said that, last week, only like 7 days or maybe a little bit more than that ago, within 10 days of now, um, Google Maps removed that anomaly. If you go to that same location now on Google Maps, you can't find that anymore. It's just been smudged out. And Tim Gallaudet saw that. And when everybody was murmuring about that on Twitter, many people were posting video captures of what it looked like from a 360-degree view. If you spun around it, it looks like it has structuring underneath what looks like almost a lip of a round structure that sticks out towards going away from the shore into the ocean, um, and all kinds of pictures that were before and now what it looks like after. Tim mentioned that it's pretty upsetting if this was a coordinated effort because even the USGS has data on this structure. Okay? So that's a government agency that he's looked into that knows about this being there. But Google Earth has removed it. And so, future generations may look at this and realize that data is being covered up actively within um, our most traditionally used applications, Google Maps.
Yeah. Well, Darcy, on that note, let me thank you so much for your time today. It has truly been a pleasure having you on. Again, the name of the documentary is Transmedium Fastmovers and USOs. I am going to put links into the show notes for this. It is available on Amazon. People can stream this right now, as I understand correctly. So
Yeah.
let me take us out by asking what comes next for you. You had mentioned potentially doing some more documentaries, maybe on various aspects of this, maybe on other phenomena. Where are things going for you in the next few months?
Yeah, so I want to look at Puerto Rico next. This is a pretty highly reported area where there's been UFOs and USOs, objects going in and out of the ocean. Especially if you think about Puerto Rico, historically, it's been reported that many different things have been happening around the Bermuda Triangle, ships going missing, UFOs, USOs, and then Puerto Rico is right at the corner of that Bermuda Triangle. Additionally, it's at the top of the world's largest ocean mountain because what you're looking at with Puerto Rico is the peak, and going off the edge of that is one of the deepest ocean trenches in the world. So at the bottom of that trench, this competes with, say, the Mariana Trench in terms of
Hmm.
depth. And you've got all kinds of activity happening in that ocean area. So what's going on there? I planned to travel out there. I've already started shooting some of it and speaking to people that are boots on the ground, witnessing this stuff, taking videos, taking pictures, and uh, possibly a whistleblower. So, yeah, thanks for having me on. People can check me out on Twitter. It's just at Occult Journeys. Instagram, Darcy Weir Films, and my website's occultjourneys.com. Don't worry, I'm not evil. There's nothing religious about that. It's just occult meaning hidden, and these journeys that I'm trying to go on with my filmmaking.
Wonderful. Darcy, one more time, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Tim. Really nice to meet you, man.